For those of you who just joined, welcome again. I'm Simon Wallace, one of the committee members of the Consultancy Specialist Group of the British Computer Society. And our speaker today is, in fact, the chair of the Consultancy Specialist Group, Alan Waugh, who seems to be popping in and out of the picture at the moment. If you've got your webcams working, I'm sure he'll be back in a second. Today, Alan will be talking about strategic engagement of IT in business. This is the third in his series of talks around that area. And in this one, he'll be focusing on the IT business case. I'll say just a few more words about Alan in a moment. Firstly, just a few announcements from us. The next thing we're doing online is our annual general meeting. In this case, there is not a talk that follows the annual general meeting. It's just the meeting. However, we would like you to come along and participate in that. We want to have a jolly good chat about how to make these sessions work, what content you want to hear, what speakers we can invite, volunteers absolutely to give talks, most welcome. And the other thing we'd really like to see is a few more volunteers to be on the committee. We absolutely welcome more people to join us. So if you've got any inkling that you might be interested in being a committee member, then please do sign up for the AGM meeting, which is next week on the 28th of October at 6 p.m. The next proper talk is Gardeners Not Mechanics, How to Cultivate Change at Work with Gary Lloyd. That's on Tuesday the 10th of November, and we're hoping that'll be quite an interesting interactive session, so that would be well worth signing up for. Beyond that, there's one more talk which is planned but not yet available on the web to sign up for, which is 2020 Hindsight in IT Management with Peter Pleason, and that's be on the 8th of December. As I was saying while people are connecting, we do welcome your contributions today in terms of comments and questions, and you should be able to find the question section inside your control panel. If you didn't see the info before, look for that little red box with a white arrow in it. That will open your control panel, and you'll find within that a questions section. What you might like to do is to press the top right square on that, which will open up and keep the questions open on your screen if you want to do that. We'll also be running some polls. When a poll happens, it's really obvious what to do. It just takes over your screen. You've got the questions, some answers, tick the box or boxes and press submit. So I think that's all I need to tell you in terms of how the evening will run. Obviously, mainly it's a question of listening to our expert speaker, Dr. Alan Waugh, Bachelor of Arts, Master of Business Art, Management, Master of, I can't go to this list, Alan, I've got so many letters after his name, it's ridiculous. But Alan is a practicing IT transformation consultant, and his doctorate, very relevant to this section, was looking at strategic management of IT in large complex organizations. So he is a top expert in this field. So I'm sure Alan will tell you just a bit more about himself in a moment, and I'm sure I don't need to. So Alan, over to you.
Thanks, Simon. That was great. Simon, if I could ask you to let me know if there's anything wrong with the display during the talk, like either the webcam or the slides, because I'm struggling a little bit at my end, but okay. I'm sure it'll be okay. All right, well, first of all, welcome, and thank you for coming. This is a fairly specialized talk this evening on IT business cases, and really looking at the area of strategic engagement of IT in business. So let me first of all say a few things about the presentation. There are a lot of slides in the slide pack, And so I think the slide pack is much more a resource. We won't use all of the slides. We may not indeed get through to the end of all the things that I have lined up for us. But that's fine. So I may point you into some of the slides. The agenda for this evening then is as follows. So we're going to look at IT business cases, and first of all, I just want to kind of just position this work within some of the other things that we've done on this topic. Then just cover off why is engagement such an important topic? What is going on there? And we'll cover those briefly, and then go into IT business cases. What are their challenges, and the process by which they're created? And then particularly focusing a little bit on how can we improve the IT business cases. They are at the centre of the engagement between business and IT. They are a point of engagement. They are the way in which the IT department gets to know the importance of things that the business is bringing to it. It's part of demand management, and when it's done well, as we'll see from the research out from the business schools, it makes a big difference to the outcomes of both individual projects and the way in which the IT department contributes to the business. So we are in that space, and then we may not get to some of the final areas of more developing generally the capabilities of our organizations to create effective IT business cases, but I'll certainly point you in, and there's some materials in the slide decks. Okay, so a little bit about me. Simon's really covered it, really. I'm chair of this group. I'm a management consultant, have been for an awful long time. My original role was as an academic and a researcher in the early part of my career. I've got a doctorate in the strategic management of IT from LBS, London Business School, and so this is an area which comes straight out of my research. So what I'm hoping to do this evening is to bring together some of the research, and but also some of the practice as well. So from my practice and from the practice of consultancies that I've worked with. In terms of strategic engagement, I've worked at quite a few blue chips in a variety of roles, which has given me some deep insights into the realities of this area. It is really a difficult area. There's no question about it. This is part of 3 talks, really, all of which are on the BCS YouTube channel. The first one looked more generally at this area of business and IT engagement. An earlier one looked at how IT roadmaps and demand management work in this space, and this one is on IT business cases. So point you off into those. And in terms of positioning this topic, we're clearly in the field of post-experience topic here. So this is really not an entry-level topic. We are dealing with a body of knowledge which is good, but not well applied, and I think we'll see that as we go forward. And we're aiming really to increase our success rate, really, at this, particularly relevant for anybody in that kind of IT management, CIO, BRM space, as well as IT consultants who find themselves frequently, unless they're very technical consultants, they're IT management consultants, they'll find themselves in the space between the business and IT all of the time. And indeed, it's not uncommon for external consultants to be asked to support the creation of business cases. It can sometimes help that they bring a bit of independence. So okay, so let's have that's me. Let's have our first poll and see who we've got in the audience. So first poll then is who are you? So I'm going to launch the poll, and what you should see is an opportunity to kind of categorize your role. And let's just see who we've got in the audience, because what I would like to do, if it's okay, is to is at various points to invite people to bring in their own additional thoughts, experiences and insights into what we're doing. So first poll, what should be in front of you on your screens is an opportunity to click a number of options. So please do that. And most of you are. We're getting a steady stream of responses through. I'll close the poll once the responses slow down. Another few seconds to respond. Okay, all right. I think that will do. We've got nearly 70% of people responding, and here we go. Hopefully, you have in front of you the outcomes. So something like 44% of us are from engagement roles, which is great. We've got 61% who are seeing themselves responding as IT or business consultants, internal or external, and that's the majority of our participants. And we've got one or two people who are in other roles. So thank you for that. That does help me a lot to know what we've got. We've got consultants and engagement professionals. All right, let me continue, and what I want just to do is to start at this issue of engagement. So it has never been easy in corporate IT in particular for the IT and the business professionals to work well together. I've just whimsically pulled up a shot from the film of Alan Turing, and it's a dramatization of something that happened, but he ended up shouting at his business side sponsor that you'll never understand what I'm creating, which I found quite amusing at the time. Being a little bit more serious and less dramatic, this is some research out from McKinsey, and it's looking at what is the role of the IT plays. And it's really interesting to look at this. Is IT playing the role of a supplier? It's an order taker? Is it a consultant? Or is it truly partnering? And contrasting the difference between what its role actually is and what its role should be. And this is CXOs, IT CXOs and business CXOs in a very large number of organizations, 700 globally. And you can see that the position is that whilst most people know that we should be in there as partners, and the business case is one of the areas where we would partner to create them, the unfortunate reality is that many IT departments are being used as or play the role of suppliers. They're not truly partnering. They're not truly in that kind of collaborative role with the business. And if that is not enough of a problem, that feeds through into performance gaps over what could be done. So what McKinsey found was that for some really important things that the IT organization should be effective at, like helping the business to implement innovations, to bring new ideas to the business, to engage with business leaders. For those, the lack of, for those organizations which were partnering, they were very much more effective than those which are in a supplier role or order taking role. And that's kind of, for most of us who are operating in this field, it's kind of intuitive. We see it on on a daily basis, this gap in engagement, in relationships between IT and business, feeding through into lost opportunities for IT to be used effectively by the business. So it is an important area, and a lot of missed opportunities. We covered this in a bit more detail in a previous talk, which is on the YouTube channel, and I brought together some translational research around what the full range of engagement activities that organizations are using to improve this situation. And I've also added the key slides, the 3 key slides from that talk, to the end of this slide deck. So if this is something of interest to look at in more depth, because we're just looking at the business case area today, then have a look at that talk on the YouTube channel, or the slides at the end of the slide deck. And it's a kind of checklist, really, of all of the things that can be done. So it could be used to look at what your organization or client organization, for a consultant, is doing, what it's not doing, what's doing well, what's doing less well, and looking at that gap. So this having kind of hopefully established that this area of IT business engagement is an area of some importance. There are many things that are important in IT, but it's one of those important areas, and it represents by and large an opportunity. If we can get our IT departments, whether we are in them or we're consulting to them, to move along that maturity curve from being just providers of services through to trusted partners and strategic partners, then that is good for them. By and large, it's good for just about everybody, but that doesn't mean that it is easy. Another poll. Let me just probe where you think your organizations are. So I'm going to launch another poll and ask you where the organizations that either you are with or if you are consulting to are in terms of, are they order takers or are they strategic partners, and all that kind of continuum. If you are a consultant, then you may have multiple clients, in which case kind of take an average of where you find your client organizations are at this time. So you should find that there's a poll in front of you, and you need to select the one that best describes the relationship between IT and business. Oh, and there's some responses coming in. Thank you very much for that. And we'll pause for a second whilst people respond. Another couple of seconds and we'll be towards 70%, and we'll close the poll. We'll see if our audience's experiences are very different to mine and McKinsey. Okay, I'll close the poll now, and in a second, hopefully it will appear. Oh, okay, right, okay. So what we've got here is quite interesting. I think we've got broadly, we're agreeing with McKinsey that our organizations, in terms of where they are, we're agreeing with McKinsey. The majority of organizations that we're working with are order takers or service providers. Relatively few have reached the stage of true strategic partnering between IT and business, as we could see from McKinsey's contrasting of those which are and those which are not partners, and how they perform on some important dimensions. That is a real missed opportunity, and the reason why we're talking about it. Because if it wasn't that important, we'd talk about something else important. So this is a fairly important area. Okay. Right, so let's get focused in on business cases. I think, as I indicated, this is one of the key areas where business and IT can come together and establish what it is that the business needs and what the case for it is, and, if you like, optimize the usage of IT at the level of a single initiative. So business cases are particularly useful for IT projects, but actually you could apply a business case to other IT developments as well, IT infrastructure improvements in the back office, which may involve the business a lot less, or IT service improvements and developments could all be subjected to this area of a business case. And many organizations use IT business cases. I'm back with Alan Turing and Bill, the imitation game, and I was amused that when I watched it that at one point Denniston, the kind of business side sponsor, was asking Turing why he's building a machine, and the business case came out from Turing. The machine will allow us to break out every message and win this war. So it's a really succinct business case. But business cases have been around for quite some time. I think many of us on this topic, we work in organizations where there is a policy requirement out from the finance department that significant IT investments do need a business case, and there will be a process for it. We'll go into that in a bit more detail in a little bit later. But I thought it'd be interesting just to jump back to the very dawn of commercial computing, and because I live in West London, Leo was the Lyons Electronic Office, widely attributed this side of the Atlantic as being the first commercial computer was developed out in West London, and it's the original documentation to it is held at Warwick University, and looking through it, we can see that actually they did propose Leo with a business case, and that business case had some of the characteristics that are very common today. So describing what the opportunity was for Leo, it was mainly being put forward as an administrative tools of saving administrative time. It did outline options, they did estimate costs, they did calculate benefits. There wasn't a lot of talk about risks, which we'll come into, but it was all there. And some of the problems were there too. The costs turned out to be very optimistic. This is a research paper out from Kingston University. They looked at this, and these were the kinds of things they were finding, that the optimism bias was present right at the beginning. The benefits which were all about administrator savings, but there is little evidence that any redundancies or FTE reductions happened. And this is again a very common thing today. As I said, risks, they did not go into in great detail, though it was clearly a risky thing to be taking on. And although this is undoubtedly technically and a success, and commercially it's a milestone, Leo didn't make a lot of money from it. Indeed, they lost money on the on this, and a significant amount in present day terms. So we're not in territory which is blindingly new. It's been something that we have been doing for some time, and indeed business cases are something which come through from other parts of business. So what is a business case? Well, the Association of Project Management Body of Knowledge has this definition, which I quite like, provides justification for undertaking a project or an initiative, and it looks at the benefits, costs, and risks. And but there is a slight problem with business cases, which is that although we know what to do, and we know what good practices are. The reality is slightly different. So Gartner, who many of you will know, it's an international industry research body, commercial research body, industry research rather than academic research. It points out that business cases are generally viewed only as documents for gaining funding. I don't know if you've come across this. I'm sure many of you have, but that is often what it is seen as a hurdle to get across. Once approved, they're put away, and they point out that few organizations track the benefits through. Professor Flyberg at Oxford has a similar, even more cynical view. And I quite identify with this from my practice. I've seen plenty of this. He describes them as a planned, systematic, deliberate misstatement of costs and benefits to get the projects approved. And this is I find very common, that people are using, when they have to do the business case, it becomes a bureaucratic chore. They are finding ways of building up the benefits in order to get the project approved, and that is a missed opportunity, because the business case is an opportunity for IT, business, the protecting forums of the organization to look at something new and really understand it before we commit money, reputations, energy, and so on. Back with academic research, so this is three very, very eminent professors, mainly from Cranfield, although Joe Peppard is now at MIT. And they looked specifically at IT business cases, and they really they didn't quite confirm some of the previous observations, but they pretty much found very similar things. So what they looked at was a large number of organizations, and really asked questions about whether people were happy with the way their business cases were being created. Was it a satisfactory process? And they found that large numbers of organizations were not happy with what was happening on business cases. What they also went on to look at is how does that relate to the success that organizations get from their projects, their investments, their initiatives in IT. And what they found was that the more successful organizations were much more focused on really understanding the project, particularly what benefits were coming through, and using the business case process to gain commitment. Whereas the less successful organizations were much more focused on that, getting across just getting the case in so that it could be funded. And what they also found was that, and to their surprise, was that organizations often don't demand rigorous evidence to support either the costs or the benefits. And there is some rationality to this, in that it is sometimes very difficult to because these are all forward-looking things in the business case. So we're looking at what are the costs going to be, what are the benefits going to be, what risks will we encounter. It can be quite difficult, and so being evidence-based in the business case can be quite difficult, particularly for people who don't do business cases very often. And this is one of the challenges. But what was a surprise to them was that their organizations are quite lax about requiring this. Instead of turning it back saying we need some evidence, in many cases they are quite happy to accept the level of rigor level of rigorous evidence that that comes to them at the authorization stage. And I pulled this out from the NHS. I mainly consult into healthcare, and from a director of estates across in Berkshire. Really, he's formerly part of NHS Improvement, which is their central transformation organisation, and he's pointing out, this is actually just come out this month, which is why I kind of grabbed it and put it into a slide. He was pointing out that business cases are just a missed opportunity in his experience. And he's, if I quote from him, it's really the best way of challenging yourself to find the best way of answering the problem you've set yourself. And I think that is an important piece of insight from a leader. He's not just talking about IT business cases, but business cases generally, that they are a terrific opportunity for us to really think things through at the level of what is this going to do for the business. And back with McKinsey, again, very contemporary. This is bringing us bang up to date. They've surveyed 1,800 managers, and it's just been published. And they were making the point that that it isn't different for digital, that we are experiencing out in the digital transformation domain a lot of difficulties in realizing the benefits. And so their stats, which you probably have heard, because these are fairly consistent over decades, is that whilst something like 8 in 10 organizations are pursuing digital initiatives, transformative in the main, only about 14% are realizing the benefits. And in many cases, in a lesser percentage, are able to sustain those benefits. And their advice was that the fact that it's digital doesn't exempt it from investment decisions being subject to rigorous review. And I kind of agree with them. So what does that kind of do for us? Well, I think what that shows is that it seems almost self-evident that when we're going to commit resources, and these by and large, these are other people's money, taxpayers' money, investors' money, and the implications are for other people. When we're going to do that with IT, that we need to do our very best to think through ahead the investment case, the IT business case, thinking through in an evidence-based way what the costs are going to be and what the benefits are going to be, and surfacing all the risks, looking at all the options, and bringing it together so that the case is known well ahead. But the research by academia, industrial research organizations, and consultants pointing towards a gap, that we are not doing it as well as we need to. And those that are able to do it well are gaining an advantage over those that are less able to do it well. And so in there lies a terrific opportunity. But it isn't easy, as we will go on to look at. Another poll. Oops. I can get my polls to work. Okay, so let's just see how we are engaged with business cases. So, if I position myself, I'm a general IT management consultant. I have, during my career, on several occasions, been a part of teams or individually asked to work with organizations to frame their business case. As I indicated, sometimes that is helpful to them because you're bringing a level of independence, external independence, into the equation as an external consultant. So I've had quite a lot of involvement with it. Some of my roles have been BRM roles, business relationship management roles. They've been in the engagement space within IT departments, and that is a role where you are often asked to help facilitate the business case process or contribute to it if it's a if the relationship is largely that of a service provider. It's not a true partner yet. Then in that situation, the BRM is often corralling the solutions architects and the other parts of the IT department to bring together the technical solution and the costs and project planning parameters for that. So I've got quite a bit of experience. I'm interested in what your experience is. So I'm going to launch a poll. So what best describes your involvement in IT business cases? So is it little? Are you a user of business cases? If you're a project manager, that might be the case. Are you involved in their development? Are you the person accountable for them? And other. So if you could, if you can respond to that, that would be great. And you are. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now and we'll see how we are doing. And in a moment, it should have been. Indeed it has. Okay, well, this is really quite interesting. I think that we've got quite a lot of people who are involved. About half of us are involved in business cases, either as consultants or as senior IT managers, and a third of us are accountable, which is really quite interesting for some of the business cases. So that's we've got quite an experienced and engaged audience, engaged with the topic audience. So thank you for that. That's really quite interesting. Because I'm going to, before moving on to look at the IT business case process, I'm going to pause to ask for any questions or if there are any contributions. So some points that you're burning to make, then if you can indicate with the hands up sign, then Simon will bring you in. Okay, and there's a contribution from one of our colleagues saying, on reflection, I've never been involved in IT business case, but I have been involved in the contribution of business to business cases, often needing to input the IT costs before knowing what technology will be, before knowing what technology will be used, if at all. That's really quite interesting. And I identify with that as well. That really does resonate with me, that how we are as IT professionals, IT consultants, that's that question which we all dread, and we know it's coming far too early, which is, I have this idea, how much will it cost? And you know, the classic response of it depends somehow or other doesn't please our business colleagues who are asking that question.
Alan, we have a hand up from William Hooper. William, did you want to unmute?
Hi, William.
Thank you. Alan, the sort of examples I've come across span quite a range. At one extreme, we have the transactional replacement of like for like, which tends to be fairly pedestrian and predictable, albeit some of them go wrong. With the more transformative, I've been working on the exploitation of the likes of AI which may be taking a company in a completely different direction.
Yeah.
Any observation on the implications of those?
Yeah, I identify very strongly with what you're saying, William, because it manifests itself in my experience in this way, that organizations often have their business case processes defined by the finance department, and it's often of necessity an elaborate process, but it is often a one-size-fits-all process. And we'll come on to a tool which has been developed by John Ward, which you might have come across, or some people might have come across, called the strategic grid. We'll come across that in a little while. But what John Ward found was that exactly what you're saying, that there is different types, quite a broad, quite a different range of things that we invest in IT. But the business case process often is one size fits all. So if you are, as in your example, we are trying to create a case for, or needing to create a case for an AI implementation, then that is a very different feel to it to if I am doing a move, an upgrade to my data center. I'm moving it from one area to the other, or I'm doing something which is just maintenance. And the business case process often doesn't take that sufficiently into account. And so what Ward and indeed in my practice I do is to try and reflect the nature of the investment in the business case. So something in AI at the moment is going to be quite innovative. I'm going to have to do an awful lot of work to and rely a lot more on research for my benefits and my costs. And the business case will also have a lot of inherent risk in it. So that so what is being proposed needs to reflect that. So whereas if I'm doing something that is much more operational, that it should be better known, we may be able to use more analysis and get much firmer on costs and on benefits, and in that way end up with quite a different business case. And indeed the size of the business case might be quite different as well, with the innovative stuff being much more agile feel to it, and the operational stuff being much more firm. John Ward's framework, as we'll see in a little while, makes a distinction between truly innovative things, strategic investments, which I think is where you are with the AI, I suspect. Things which are operational, which we know a lot about, and things which are mandatory, things we have to do, their maintenance, and the business case needs to reflect that, and too frequently does not. So I mean, those are some reflections. I hope that helps. Well, thank you for that. Are there any more hands up, Simon?
Not at the moment.
We've got a contribution from John Lloyd. Yes, and that contribution again, I identify with the case being made that often architects are left too late in the process, or the architecture part of the organization is left too late in the process. And for me, there is a common problem in the business case process where there is a set of what I call protective functions in an organization, and those are things like legal, security, information protection, compliance, HR and change, and architecture, technical architecture, and business architecture, which are often just left out. or if they do come in, they come in much later, after the business case has become to solidify and people have got quite attached to the initial idea. And those protective forums tend to add in some necessary complexity and cost, and that can be quite unwelcome. That's better brought in at the beginning. And as consultants and as engagement professionals, one of the things that we can do to help the process is to appropriately bring in those protective forums. And in the case of architecture, anything to do with IT will probably bring them in, because the architecture agendas and strategies of the organisation need to be reflected in the business case. Then it may be that it changes what is proposed. So I do identify with that observation that there's the architecture in particular, and I've added protective forums are left out or come in far too late. Yes, another contribution coming in is that that business cases with lightweight process and governance, with only necessary components, help the adoption of business cases, and I think that's very true. That there is a kind of tendency sometimes to overload the business case process, so making it overly elaborate. I think that IT engagement people in the IT department and indeed external consultants can help with that, because I think what happens is that when you are in a governance role, you may be in the finance department or in corporate governance, and you are working on these what the business case process should be for non-IT and IT projects. There is a tendency to put in a lot of just in case things, just in case we need to do this, just in case we need to do that, just in case it needs to go to this board, just in case it needs to go to this function. And it's not intended to overload the process and make it incredibly painful, but it often comes out of that design, organizational design process as a very elaborate, very bureaucratic process which must be adhered to. But my experience is that the voice of reason carries a lot of weight, and if it doesn't, if a particular IT initiative doesn't need to go to a particular forum, then usually making that point and covering it off with that forum can simplify the process dramatically. So I'm very much
if I can,
with that. Yes.
So if I can throw in a thought of my own at that juncture, in my many business cases in the public sector, I've always been absolutely horrified and terrified by how heavyweight the processes are if you follow the rule books. The Green Book, you might remember. I forget exactly, it had like 5 different cases to be made, and each of them had to go through 3 different stages. And you could imagine spending about a decade just doing a business case if you followed the rule book.
Yes, exactly true, Simon. And yeah, and I think the Green Book has been kind of counter weighted in the public sector with Agile, but it can get very elaborate, and that is a great segue into the next piece. Because what I thought it would be useful to do would be just to have a look at a business case. And not surprisingly, my clients aren't too keen on me showing business cases and critiquing them on the internet, so I can't really easily do that. But what I'm going to do, Simon will have to confirm that this can be seen. Can you see this, Simon?
Yes.
Yes, okay, all right. So it doesn't matter where this has come from. It's a public sector a business case. And I really wanted to just to scan across it, so that so that those who have not been deeply involved in business cases get to see one. And I'm not going to be particularly critical of it, because I think this is very typical. It doesn't matter where it's come from. It's come from a London local government area. And since most of us are quite deeply involved in business cases, I won't dwell on it. But I thought it'd just be interesting to have a look at one of them. So this is a business case for the replacement of the existing digital platform with a much better digital platform. So it's a major business case, and you can see the kinds of things that it covers. It's very thorough. It covers the economic case, the commercial case, the financial case, the management case. It's covering off these areas in the document, as well as the background surrounding the replacement, in this case, of the digital program. And as we scan through it, we can see that, and this is not untypical in my experience for major investments in the public sector, as Simon was saying, it is quite a weighty document and quite a lot of information to pull in, and it is projecting forwards the how much it will cost. It's also projecting forwards the skills that are required, and I'm just going to it's also doing some comparisons with others. It has the financial case involved. You can see that, those of us who've been involved in these things will be very familiar with this. The idea of the investments and the savings being brought together, so that you can see in this particular case that there's investments being made, just 5.6 million over this 5-year period, and the benefits are coming through to make that justified, to make the case at 9.4 million. You can see the differences in the shape and timing of the benefits and the investment, and all of this is incredibly useful stuff. And then quite a lot of detail, in this particular case, being thrown into appendices for those that want to go into the detail. So because we got quite an experienced audience, I won't kind of dwell on it, but you can see that they are they're quite weighty documents in many cases. This is not as weighty as some I've been involved with, but they are quite weighty documents. But they have that kind of common structure of setting out what it is that we're trying to do. What is the costs likely to be, what are the benefits likely to be, and what are the risks? So I will try and turn back to the next slide for that. And, hopefully, Simon, I'm back with the slides. Tell me if I'm not.
Yep, all's well.
So, good, thank you. So we've really covered this, and we've got a fairly experienced audience, but there is a common set of components in a business case, IT business case or any other business case, but this is a typical of an IT business case. And so, you know, the opportunity is identified and talked about, and why it's needed. Ideally, the structure is sometimes different. The various options are set out early. I'll come back to that in a second. Benefits, costs, risks are looked at. The sensitivity is sometimes included. So how sensitive is the case to different outturns? There's usually some sort of this high-level discussion of how it will happen, and then that leads on to approvals. In terms of skipping back to options, it's also quite common to find that the options are dealt with later on, that there is a preferred option, and that is a common approach that the business case is really talking about, or talking to the preferred option, and the other options are there to illustrate that the preferred option is better than the other options. But a purist would probably say you should treat all of the options equally, at least at the beginning. We saw the financial case, and this is a bit out of scope because this isn't a webinar on accountancy, but there are some requirements to understand how cash flows in and out. And the most common way of dealing with this is to calculate the ROI, the benefit of the project, expressed as a percentage of the cost. So what will we get back? But there are other measures as well. And if you've done an MBA, as I have, you get told that actually all of these can be used to illustrate different aspects of the financial case. But payback is often frowned upon alone as a way of looking at the financial case. I've pulled up here. It's too. It's not meant to be readable. A business case approach from an organization. It's a large organization. The only reason for including the graphic is to illustrate that it does get quite complex in many organizations, how you have to work through the various governance mechanisms, and that opens up an opportunity for us in IT to help the business and to, if you like, help win them over to us being partners in this endeavor, more than just providing IT costs, by helping them to understand, well, why for the IT area does this become so elaborate? I mean, they don't have such elaborations in consumer IT in Silicon Valley. They just kind of do it, and but in corporate life, in enterprise IT, there are a lot of things that have to be thought through and worked through, and that's where the elaborations come from. So we kind of play the role of ambassador for the business case and explaining to them why it's so complicated. Most people, business side, will come to this activity infrequently. We can help them by guiding them through the process. We can be analysts, and often the people business side are short of time to do this well. We can be advisors and architects, particularly on IT, and I also mentioned that there is a role, I think, for us to ensure that the organisation is protected by making sure that things go through the protective forums. I think it's also important to kind of say, because that what is open to us, particularly if we're working within an IT department, I think you probably have a bit more flexibility for an external consultant, but what's open to us will depend upon the maturity that the organisation has reached in the relationship between business and IT. And this is a little bit out of scope. It was covered in the first of the 3 talks, so jump back to that too, if this is particularly interesting. But we now know that around the world, IT departments and businesses are on a maturity curve from being order takers through trusted advisors to being strategic partners. Now you can do more in the business case process if your organization, particularly business side, is acting as a strategic partner. In some cases, you just have to accept that your ability to influence is not that great because you're seen as a service provider and an order taker. But I think my point here is that it's worth in this IT business case area, because people do get a bit challenged by making a good case, because it's not something they do frequently. We do have an opportunity here to earn a few extra brownie points on that journey towards strategic partner. John Ward and his team at Cranfield particularly majored on the difficulties that business cases have in the area of benefits. They saw that as being important, but the benefits and not being able to rigorously identify the benefits, which leads to optimism bias, generally overstating the benefits. but other research has shown that actually there are wider areas where business cases challenge organizations. So oftentimes the process is deficient, that we struggle on costs. Risks are not dealt with adequately. And the business case ideally is not a document that is just done at the beginning. It's a document which exists throughout the project. I'm going to skip over a couple of slides now, which are really just illustrating some of the problems with some examples, and some of the some of the publicly available examples are quite spectacular. I was involved with the close down, not startup, but the close down of the National Programme for IT, and that was a huge program. And some of the business cases in that program worked out really well, like the N3, the new national network for the NHS, and PACS, which is the imaging solution which replaced wet films with digital images. But the core, the business case for the core replacements of the 600 or so hospital IT systems was done with terrific rigor, great consultation, looked like a great business case, but in flight encountered a whole stack of problems, and in the end, what was justified in the business case was very partially delivered. So it's particularly the big end of things that things can be spectacularly difficult, and as in that program, once you get into it, it's really difficult to pull out. But the business case helps you to by tracking the business case, you can see when the business case begins to become more and more difficult and begins to evaporate. And that's really, again, I'm not going to go into these three examples in detail, but just make the point that the National Programme for IT is actually an example of how business cases work well, because the business cases created at the beginning were under continuous scrutiny by Parliament and the Audit Commission. And when it became increasingly clear that the core part of the program, not all of it, the core part of the program needed to be scaled back, the business case had not panned out as expected. That scrutiny allowed those actions to be taken, and Christine Conley was recruited from Cambridge Reps, which is the CIO who worked for, to help sort that out and to bring a new business case forward for a new organizational structure and a new way of approaching it. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to some ideas on how we can improve IT business cases, and I'm going to move fairly quickly over them. What I've really assembled from research and from practice is a set of ideas and tools for improving those, mainly the four areas of business case. What are the opportunities? How do we establish what the likely costs are going to be? How do we frame benefits that are realistic and avoid the human tendency to be optimistic? And what about risks? So I think there's a few things to bring in. We've kind of already covered this a little bit. One of the big criticisms of business cases, including IT business cases, is it is just so bureaucratic, and it's a really easy thing to critique it for. But there is a simple solution here, which is that if it's a small IT initiative, as one of our contributors said earlier, we don't need to have an elaborate business case. But what is important is that even if it's small, those core components of the business case are thought through proportionately. So I'm not one of these people who think that because it's small, it doesn't need a business case. I am almost in the opposite vein, that even if it's a small IT investment, it needs a small business case that covers those areas of cost, benefits, and risks. But if it's a large business, large investment, a large IT project, then that is where more elaboration is needed, more investment is needed. And indeed, if it is sorry, just my slightly out of order. If it's a major project, then as Simon indicated, we can approach it in a kind of iterative way with a strategic outline case, which establishes the strategic case, and then the organization and its protective forums and its governance mechanisms and its funding levels can look at that before going into more detail with a fuller business case coming out of that process. So and then that level of elaboration, which Simon quite rightly said was laid out, so I think there's a fifth in the Treasury Green Book for how to create business cases, really is only appropriate where you have a large project. I mentioned John Ward's work earlier, and this is his strategic grid. He makes the point that creating a business case for something that's innovative and which we by definition won't know a lot about, we won't have a lot of evidence to go on, is quite different to creating a business case that for something that we know a lot about, an operational part of the IT estate. And also there is a difference when something is strategic as well. And he makes the point that things move around. So at the moment, quantum computing was ultra innovative. You would not, if you were trying to make a business case for an organization, let's say you are a trading organization in the city, getting in early to quantum computing, then you would not bet the firm on it. It would be a small, exploratory, experimental type case, a business case to explore things. If, on the other hand, it's intelligent automation in an insurance company, a strategic area, I would suggest, then you want to make some fairly sizable bets in something that at least locally is going to have some risk associated with it. If it's operational, then you ought to be able to better estimate costs and benefits. And if it's mandatory, then Ward makes the point that actually you don't want to spend very much on it. The business case ought to be to spend as little as possible, because it's not going to power your business forwards. But if, for example, the regulator wants something done and you have a financial services company under regulation, then you will have to do it. But you probably don't want to do it in the most innovative way possible. So I've used this out there, as many others have, and I think some of the consultants on the call will have used it, and it really is quite useful to bring the business case into some sense of proportionality and to frame it. We can do things which are innovative and justify them with a business case and cover off all of those areas, but it has a very different feel to it. I've mentioned the protective forums, and one of the things that I've seen a lot is people trying to get it done quickly, get it through, often using, sometimes using political mechanisms and social mechanisms. But for a large organization, there can be real problems in the area of protective forums. One initiative might be quite justifiable on its own, but it can cause problems in other parts of the organization. And architecture was mentioned. If you just look at the business case in isolation and not run it through the architects, then it can cause real long-term problems by disrupting the chosen architecture that the organization is going through. I've been involved in one or two where information protection has been involved, where an initiative to grow grow a revenue stream in the digital space looks good for one part of the business, but has risks in other parts of the business. And I just also, if we looked back at the example that I pulled up earlier, and I don't think it's untypical, there is a common charge that it's actually difficult to read a business case. Only this week I was talking to a CIO who attended a meeting about a business case, not a massive investment, but significant. And nobody was really admitting, though she realized later, that they were struggling to understand the business case. And she had spent part of a previous evening creating a little crib sheet, a 2-page crib sheet summarizing the business case, which she was able to share with people. And people were desperate to get hold of the 2-page crib sheet afterwards, because we do have a tendency sometimes to make it quite difficult. And there's a few techniques here which I use and others use. One is just to try and keep it jargon light. The second is to try and decompose things, the McKinsey top-down thinking approach, to recognize that there are different personality types. And I tend to be a bit of an innovator. So if I write a very visionary piece and it proclaims the importance of liberating the future, that isn't going to play so well to the majority of people in organizations who are harmonizers, directors, guardians of good things. And it's also worth, particularly an external consultant, you find that that the business case is essentially a selling document, or certainly an influencing document, and you have to be really careful to do it ethically. And I've certainly found that if the business case is constructed as a story, it kind of tells the story, then that is really quite helpful. So a few ideas there, and a slight final caution that business cases often are approached by people in a political way. So I've found a few whimsical things here, but I've certainly experienced a situation where the case is being projected as, well, it's been agreed by somebody important. You know, in a professional services firm who is important, because whereas I have a surname and a Christian name, the important people in a professional services firm are known universally by their Christian names. So it's quite amazing working in such a corporate IT department, how many times people say, oh, I discussed it with Bill. And you know that Bill is one of the important people, and he was really in favor. And so you just be slightly careful that the business case process is often gamed. You also got to be careful of people who want to do things, but the benefits, which are often cuts, are in another part of the organization. So they're going to benefit, others are going to lose out. That's going to be a really difficult thing to make happen in the end. It'll be very difficult for them to create the cost reductions in another part of the organization. Okay, so a few ideas there about where and how we can improve the business case process. When it comes to costs, then we know that there are quite a lot of difficulties in projecting costs, and this is an area where an awful lot of IT projects run over. I think the average from recent research is about a 30% overrun, but about 1 in 5 IT projects have very significant overruns, so something like 200%. And so we need to kind of really recognize that, and the business, and always educate the business during the business case process into this. So what is important is there are a few things here which I think I found really useful and come through in some ways from the research. We often miss out costs. Integration, change management often missed out. So one of the big things that we can do as an IT consultants and engagement professionals is help people to identify all those costs. It's also quite difficult to know what the costs will be sometimes, because as I say at the bottom, you need to be very careful about the IT industry sales processes, which tend not all to be they tend to be very optimistic about some of the costs that you're likely to experience, and reference sites are often unreliable because they are early adopters and sometimes lost leaders by the IT industry. But one of the ways that I find it does work is that oftentimes we are not the first organization to do something, and so it's often helpful to find other organizations that have done what we've done, even if they're direct competitors. A CIO to CIO discussion can be really quite useful in getting what actually happened. It has to be a private conversation, and it tends to be at that level. But that can really unearth some really interesting pointers from those that have for a variety of reasons, gone ahead. There is a natural domino effect in innovation in IT, where some organizations go ahead. The area which I was particularly successful at Bupa when I was there was making the point that if IT projects are going to overrun, why don't we accept that and build in and ask a simple question? If my IT project costs 2 or 3 times more than we're currently projecting, does that undermine and evaporate our business case? So this is really this area of sensitivity, and not enough, in my opinion, is done there. And okay, I'm just going to skip over some of these things in the interest of time. Similarly, on benefits, this is where the researchers have really come down as being one of the biggest difficulties in IT business cases, and it's almost human. We are incredibly optimistic oftentimes about what's likely to happen, and so I think there's a few things here which are important. Often there are benefits which are missed. So particularly if you are in the innovation space, you are often opening up options for your organization, and options have value. So there are benefits which sometimes get missed, and as IT professionals, we can help the business to identify those. In terms of hard benefits, I found it really useful to be very clear about what benefits are going to release cash, i.e. there is going to be cash released, as opposed to cash realizable benefits, which are, there are benefits there which could be realized as cash. And the classic one there is where we are, for example, saving 20 minutes of a professional's time across a large number of professionals. It sums up to a large amount of money, but will it actually be realized, or will it realize itself as something else? And non-cash benefits. Again, since we know we're likely to be optimistic, why don't we model that? What happens if the benefits are lower than we are expecting by a factor of 2 or 3? Does the business case evaporate? I'm really keen on this idea that the business case is a tool we can use to model at what point does it become too difficult and evaporate. Okay, so moving on, I would also point out that we can actually be duped a little here, because different projects can claim the same benefits, and as particularly if you're in a BRM role or PMO role, then you can look across all of the projects and just make sure that you haven't got multiple projects claiming the same benefit. This is not as unusual as it might seem. You know, if you're going to be able to eliminate a cost with a particular system, then it's only going to be eliminated once. If several projects are eliminating the same cost, then that's not going to work out too well. And similarly with proofs of concept in the innovation space, and also being aware that a lot of people will say, well, we don't need to invest in infrastructure because we're using the infrastructure that's there. But at some point, the infrastructure gets overloaded and a step change in investment is needed. And just completing this, risks are similarly challenging. It is important to try to make sure that the risks that we are taking on are sensible. We can take high risks if there are high rewards. And so the innovation space can be high risk. But what's important in the business case is that we're open and honest about it, so that the business and the IT leadership can make sure that the risks that we're taking on individually and collectively across the portfolio make sense. And the a similar kind of thing here around things that we can do to improve the area of risk. I have found that basic research techniques can be used quite effectively here to and they're not used enough. People like Gartner and Forrester are looking across technologies all of the time. I find their reports not sufficient for a business case, but the one-on-one discussions with analysts can be very, very revealing about the risks that they are seeing across the world. And there are economies that go well ahead in innovation, ahead of the UK and Gartner, particularly the US economies, and Gartner have sight of those. And also the engagement of the protecting functions, which I've also mentioned. As IT folks, we often, in the business case process, are the harbingers of doom, but we don't need to do that often. We can actually bring in the risk functions and the legal functions and so on to advise the business on those risks. Okay, so I think it's time for it's probably time for me to pause for questions. So Simon, have we got any questions in the waiting to be answered?
Nothing fresh at the moment. Amit had a follow-up from the previous session, and I see William put his hand up again in the previous session. I'm not sure whether, William, you had a fresh thing that's still relevant, because I appreciate you put your hand up a long time ago, but you can, I think, unmute yourself if you want to speak.
Hi, William.
Sorry, that was a mistake. Really good. Thank you very much, Alan. Great talk.
Okay, all right. Is there anybody else that wants to add to that? I'm particularly interested if there are techniques that have worked well for you, which you'd like to share with others. We are on the internet, so don't mention your organisations in anything other than glowing terms. Is there anything else that people would like to contribute? I'd be really interested.
Oh, that's a fresh thing from Gary there.
Okay, let's just. Sorry, I'm struggling a little bit at my end.
Yeah, Gary's saying, do you think more effort could go into validating assumptions and doing so on an ongoing basis?
Yes, definitely. It is a balance, and because it is a balance. My experience has been that we don't do enough of it. And an example, which is I was asked to help with a problem at a large hospital. They were this is about 8 or a little more years ago. They were going to invest a very, very significant amount of money. It was nationally funded in a new core hospital information systems and a BI systems. They were going for electronic health records and a data-driven organization. although it was being funded largely from the centre, from national level, it was the board wanted to know they were using public funds well and what the benefits were, and it was proving incredibly difficult. And so the CIO and the FD asked myself and some of my colleagues to have a look at it. And what I found was that by using our research skills, we're able to connect across to research organizations and hospitals in the US that have done this, and construct an evidence-based view of what the benefits were going to be. And those were mainly reduction in administrative time for clinicians, and then operational efficiencies which came from deploying BI. But by taking those things which were kind of being assumed from the advice of the vendor, but not taking that assumption, not allowing those assumptions to stand, but researching them, it did take quite a bit of effort. It took probably about 2 person months of effort to put a really solid evidence behind it. And why do I say it was solid? It's because the board accepted it. And so the CIO was able to, and the CFO were able to take that evidence to the board. So I completely agree with you, Gary. We don't do enough to unpack those assumptions and creatively look at how we can take those assumptions and get evidence underpinning them. Another very quick example was I was asked to look at a similar time at the investment in the National Research Network, which is called JANET. Many of you will know it from university, but actually the majority of traffic that travels across JANET is data from research, genomics, particle research, those kinds of things, vast amounts of data. Unfortunately, it was the period of austerity, and they needed to increase the network for a variety of reasons, and they could very easily identify how much it would cost, but the benefits were very difficult. And in a period of austerity, spending what was very, very large amounts of money was going to be difficult. And what we did there was we used a technique from research called a Delphi technique. It's very difficult to determine whether the competitiveness of the UK would be impacted if the investment did not take place. But what we did is we talked to what was probably the top relevant 200 or so research leaders around the UK. These were very senior people, and brought together their expert view in what is called a Delphi study. So you pull the experts, and that becomes the basis for the evidential basis, the best evidential basis we could come up with for why that investment was needed. And although when I joined that study, it was believed that there wasn't any chance of this being funded, it was indeed funded, and the appropriate minister felt that evidence was good enough. But it took it from vague admonitions about the UK's competitiveness needed this into something much more substantive, not totally factual. The corralling of the numerous expert viewpoints, but it allowed us to get out of that. So I think there's a lot more that can be done. So I think you're absolutely right, Gary. A bit of an elaborate explanation, but hopefully it helped. Okay, I think we're beginning to run to time, Simon. So I'm just going to, if it's okay, just spend 1 minute and point into some other materials. Should this be materials that you are interested in? I've put a few slides together on what happens to business cases in the aggregate. So this is really the PMO view, and how and some examples again from my practice and others of how IT consultants and IT engagement people can help the organizations to develop their capabilities in business cases. And there have been some really interesting efforts made there. And I also put together some, I also included in the slide deck, we won't have time to talk about ServiceNow, but if you are using demand management within a piece of software like ServiceNow, the business case can be captured there. And very finally, I've included some text, one of which is very good. No, they're both very good actually. Sorry, one of which is from the BCS, and is very good. The other is from HBR and is also very good too. I think we've run out of time, Simon. I'm sorry about that.
Well, indeed, that was very a lot of content you were trying to cover there in that time. It only means that we will have to return to this subject again in the future, I think, Alan, and invite you to cover some more of that. So yes, we should finish. The only thing to say, I think, really is you will be able to find the video of this session and the slide pack from the session on the same page that the information was on the BCS website. If you go to the Consultancy Specialist group and now look at the past events, hopefully that will be up and ready by Monday, and we'll have the video and slides ready. And also, of course, the previous two sessions from Alan on the overall topic of strategic engagement of IT and business are there as well already in the library, so you can watch all three videos. Have a boxed set evening with Alan, and hopefully there will be more to come, Alan. So thank you very much, Alan. I enjoyed that. You haven't cured my aversion to public sector business case work, but anyone wants to hire me for it, I'm sure I can swallow my pride and give it a go again. But it is a very big topic. So thank you again, Alan, and hopefully we'll see people at the AGM on the 28th, and if not, come along for the next proper talk on the 10th of November. So that's it for today. Thank you, everyone. You may go off and get your refreshments. Good night.
And thanks for me too for attending.